It's an interesting thing. There's a guy I follow on YouTube. Well, I used to follow on YouTube, and he's a African American that converted to Judaism, and he said that the transition is quite a difficult process. Would you agree with that?
Not because of the religion, but because of the people. Judaism, for all intents and purposes, is really Christianity without JC plus laws. That's it. I mean, the Bible's still the same. The God of Israel is still the same. However, I'm sure the same goes with Islam, right? I mean, there's some Muslims that don't accept other people because of the color of their skin or their background.
From my understanding, that's completely the opposite. I mean,
I've seen that when people make the Hajj, the poor Muslims are forced to basically sleep on the streets while the richer Muslims have the nice hotels. There's a big separation between wealthy Muslims and also Muslims from different countries. Muslims from Africa don't get the same treatment as Muslims from Kuwait, right? So it has nothing to do with God.
Well, yeah, no, I understand that. I understand the point you're making. However, that's only logical that if you've got more money, you can afford to have a nice hotel, and if you're poor, you'd have to have something different. But I'm saying entering the religion for Christianity and Islam is very simple. But for some reason, Judaism is a bit of a different one. Like it's
that's why I said it's the people. I'm not saying that there is a separation in the Quran. The first man to say the call of prayer was an African man, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So it's just the way the religions are acted out. These religions weren't given to angels, right? So we typically screw it up.
Right. But tell me this, like Christianity has evangelizing and Islam has dawah. Does Judaism have a similar concept?
Yes. However, nowadays, the way it's exercised, it's typically by Jews for Jews. Okay. So it's got two names. It's called Kiruv, and there's a group called Chabad, and they call it Shlichut. However, my organization encourages everybody to be Jewish. I'm similar to the Dawah guys, but I present Judaism.
Right, but see, the thing is, like, you say it's the people that... So has that always been the thing through time? Has it always been throughout the history of Judaism that it's always been a kind of secular thing whereby only a certain amount of people or certain ethnicity of people are allowed to be Jewish?
That's completely cultural. The Torah doesn't limit Jewishness or chosenhood to a specific people, because God on Mount Sinai spoke to Hebrews and what they call the mixed multitude of peoples. So it's ultimately not about blood. I mean, someone could be of a Hebrew pedigree and not be in a covenant with God, and some outsider could come in and graft himself into Israel through a conversion, right? It's our version of the Shahada, and become 100% Israel in God's eyes.
Is your belief informed via politics or via scripture? Like, I've met some guys who are Kurdish that were brought up in Israel. They're born in Israel and brought up, but they maintain their Kurdish roots. Yeah, and they tell me, look, there's poor people in Israel. There's people that are homeless in Israel, but then you've got the upper tiers like the government and all the rest of it. Now, for me, the governments and all those, their position with Palestine, with Gaza and West Bank, they're guilty of some very atrocious things. Do you understand? And I understand as a Jew, you're always going to back your people, and you're always going to, try and put them in the best light. But even under the Geneva Convention, the use of white phosphorus and stuff like that, it's a contravention of these things. Do you understand? So they're guilty of some serious crimes against humanity under the Geneva Convention itself.
I lived in Israel for 5 years, but I'm pretty sure there's a segment of the Islamic community that you don't identify with. In particular, left-wing Muslims in America, or people who claim to be Muslim by name and not by action. So only because someone happens to have Jewish blood doesn't mean they represent the religion. And that's what we're here to speak for, the religion, not the people. Just like there's Muslims who are too extreme or less devout that you don't identify with. We don't identify with people who don't believe in God. And the vast majority of people who run the state of Israel are people who don't believe in God. So the problem is people don't make a distinction when they say Jew. Is he a believing Jew, or is he just an ethnic Jew? As a matter of fact, the vast majority of religious Jews actually don't support the state of Israel. They'll live in the land, but they won't support it from a biblical perspective. They'll support it like they support any democracy, right?
And that's exactly what I was just saying. There are a sect of people that don't believe that Israel should exist from a biblical perspective. It shouldn't exist. And I was just, because he's saying there's up to 1,000 sects of Judaism. Would you agree with that? Or
no, there aren't 1,000 sects. I mean, there's probably today perhaps maybe 3 main ones, which is Reform, Conservative.
That's a far cry from 1,000. So,
well, John, when you break it down, though, Rabbi, I mean, when you break it down, those like Orthodox, I mean, you can't.
Oh, there's subsects, right? In terms of major groups, I mean, within Orthodoxy, there's a group called Hasidim. So within that group, there's dynasties and different families, right? But that's really splitting hairs. That doesn't mean that they believe something different. They follow different rabbis. Not that they're bringing something new to the table, but it's similar to people who study different versions of the Hadith. It's like a different explanation. Variety is a spice of not just life, but of religion as well. So sometimes people need different perspectives of the same material. So it's not something new. It's just a different way to present the material that's already there.
So which of these sects are the oldest?
People think that the Yemenites, the group known as Baladim, are the oldest known group in Judaism. Known today, because the vast majority of Jews from the Middle East region have sort of combined their ideologies into one group known as Edot HaMizrach. That sort of encompasses the bulk of Mizrahi Judaism. But the Yemenite community was so disconnected from the rest of the Jewish world that they actually kept a lot of their traditions and customs intact. And it wasn't until perhaps 100 years ago that those ideas came out, because half of the Yemenite community also assimilated into the bulk of Sephardi Jewry. They were known as the Shami, were the ones in the north, but the ones in the south weren't exposed to all the ideas that were permeating the Jewish world, so they kept a lot of their traditions intact. So they're more rational. Their customs resemble Islamic customs, not that they copied the Muslims, because ultimately it was Islam that copied Judaism. Islam came out of Judaism. So that you'll see prostration, that you'll see hijabs.
Certain aspects within Islam is you could say has a comparison to Judaism, but you could also say that for Christianity as well. There's a comparison.
For sure.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So look at this now. Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions because my knowledge of Judaism is very, very limited. All right. So look, what's the Judaic position when it comes to other religions, like let's say Buddhism, for example, because Judaism is a very old religion, and so is Buddhism, so is Hinduism. So they're like Zoroastrian, all of this kind of stuff is very old. So what's the position between other religions?
The answer has to exist in different parts, because there's what Jews do today and what our source material endorses. Okay. So our source material is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and the Talmud. That's really what decides Jewish law. Now, culturally, there's a lot of things that come into play. The opinions of the rabbis today, the opinion of Israelis. So according to the Torah and according to the Talmud, if the other belief system doesn't contradict certain principles that we believe that every Gentile should keep and not violate, it's considered...
It's considered halal?
No. It's considered a tolerated belief system and a tolerated people.
Tolerated, okay.
In other words, they're allowed to live amongst Israel. I don't know enough about Buddhism, but I know Hinduism would not meet that criteria just because of the array of gods that it contains within it.
Okay,
it's very similar to the Islamic notion of dhimmi.
Right.
You're a tolerated people, that we have to guard your safe being. We're not allowed to mistreat you or allow others to mistreat you, but you're not on the same level as someone keeping the full Torah or someone in the covenant. You're a tolerated people, and that's really the status of people who do not worship idols. Now, Islam, the reason Islam classifies Christianity and Judaism as people of the book is because they've acknowledged that neither Christians nor Jews are idolaters. So they're tolerated. But Muslims, for example, in India, constantly war against the Hindus because they know that that ideology is contrary to the tenets of Islam.
Okay, so what I want to do is maybe keep it on point, like on subject, like, and maybe keep it focused on Judaism and not kind of stray into Islam, because I know that can get sticky. So I'm just trying to get these concepts in my mind.
No.
It was saying something about the servant. So if you're a polytheist, you'd be considered a servant, a Gentile. Is a servant and a Gentile the same thing?
And not if you're a polytheist. If you're a polytheist, then if you reside amongst Israel, you're to be put to death.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah,
So
there's really no tolerance for idol worship, or polytheism.
Okay. So if you're a polytheist,
A polytheist is an idolater. Somebody
yeah,
believes
I
in multiple
know.
gods. Right.
Yeah. So look, so the servant. So you couldn't be a servant if you was a polytheist. You'd just be put to death.
Correct. It would behoove you to leave the borders of Israel. Israel doesn't have a command to travel the earth looking for idolaters or to destroy altars around the world, but just on their land or what they control.
Okay, so they wouldn't be able to say, okay, listen, I'm not going to be an idolatrist or a monotheist. I'll become a Jew. That option wouldn't be there for them.
That would definitely be an option for them. If anyone, as a matter of fact, we have this as a law that whenever we besiege a city, we're not allowed to besiege it from four sides. We always have to allow the inhabitants to leave out the back, and if they come to us for peace, they either have the option to accept what's called the 7 Laws of Noah or convert to Judaism.
Okay, so tell me the 7 laws of Noah then. What's that then?
All right, so the 7 Laws of Noah, the first one is called Dinim. We have to encourage Gentiles to create courts of justice to basically police themselves. They're not allowed to worship idols. They're not allowed to blaspheme God. They're not allowed to participate in sexual immorality. Murder is prohibited. Robbery is prohibited. And they're not allowed to eat the limb of a living animal. Those are the 7 Laws of Noah.
All right. I don't really see a problem with any of those.
So I believe that Muslims do not qualify as a group that keeps the 7 Noahide laws because I consider Muslims as practicing idolatry as understood in Judaism.
Okay, so look, Asher, could you explain some of the slave laws in the Talmud? Would you be able
Sure.
to do that?
Uh-huh.
Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, just ask me the question.
So what constitutes a slave? What would one have to be to constitute? I mean, from my understanding, you can't be a slave if you're Jewish. Is that right?
You could be a slave if you're Jewish.
If you're Jewish, really?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But you have to release him after 7 years, though, don't you? Or 6 years?
Correct. Although, like, he could decide to stay longer.
But technically, you have. Yeah, he can, but you have to release him as a Jew after 6 or 7 years, don't you?
Or it's not that
Yeah,
type
okay.
of slavery. It's indentured servitude. In other words, if I owe you money and I can't pay, then I'll be your butler for so many years. And some people get used to that lifestyle and want to stay permanently, and that's when the whole process that they put the awl through the ear, they pierce the ear of the person, making him a permanent slave. Now, there's 2 types of slaves. Now, the word slave and servant is the same word in Hebrew, Eved. So there's what's called an Eved Kanani, which means Canaanite slaves, but according to Jewish law, it means any Gentile slaves. And they have a different classification and different rules and laws regarding them.
So would Canaanite refer to the black slaves?
No.
No?
Canaanite because it was tied to the initial Canaanite nations that God commanded Israel to overthrow.
Right. These Canaanites, were they not black?
No.
None of
Or at
them.
least not particularly. And we don't know exactly what color they were, but I'm pretty sure they would have
Yeah, but
resembled people in the region. Huh?
Yeah, but Rabbi, it also says in the Old Testament, though, that you can actually pass your slave as an inheritance,
Sure.
a Gentile. So, but then that contradicts what you just said, though, innit? Really, because it says that you can go into foreign
But-
land.
So hold on, Safaz. Back up a bit.
Yeah.
So this rule for the 6 years for the Jewish slave or
7.
servant, 7 years for the servant.
Yeah.
Would that be the same for a non-Jewish?
No, because you can inherit that slave, and you can technically sleep with the slave, and you can beat him up and all that stuff as well. That is what it
No,
says.
wait,
in
hold
the
on,
Quran.
Couldn't beat up a slave.
Hold
You couldn't
on,
beat up a
hold
slave.
on.
No.
Wait. Hold on.
Shall I give you the verse?
Hold on one second. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so a Canaanite slave had it easier than a Hebrew slave, but a simple fact that a non-Jewish slave could obtain his freedom whenever he wanted to by converting to Judaism. every slave acquires what's called a quasi-conversion. That means he's half Jewish, but if he decides to become fully Jewish, he immediately gets released. Now, if he chooses to remain a Gentile, which I don't know why it would behoove anyone, especially at that time, because we haven't had slaves for thousands of years, to want to remain a Gentile and a slave, then he could if he wanted to. And you guys can look this up. I have a whole video. Just type in Judaism and slavery, and my video will be the first one that comes up, and I bring down all the sources.
Yo, guys, bear with me. I'm going to be back in a little while.
Now, yes, technically, the Rambam mentions a law that in terms of beating a slave, that prohibition is only against a Hebrew slave. And it says that although you're not prohibited from beating your Gentile slave, you shouldn't do so. But again, it wouldn't be an issue unless that person decided to remain a slave. Now, our slavery didn't resemble the transatlantic slave trade. In the vast majority of cases, these were people who were conquered, people who were initially trying to kill Jews, who in an act of kindness were trying to pacify and offer them their freedom in an elevated realm. In other words, idolaters today don't really resemble idolaters back then. Before the rise of Islam and before the rise of Christianity, the word idolater was synonymous with unethical person, a barbarian. So we could really view Jewish slavery as a form of rehabilitation by the simple fact that a slave goes free if he does three things. If he dons a pair tefillin, if he recites 3 verses from the Torah, or if he runs into a lake, jumps in, and he says, I'm jumping in, Lashem Geirus. For the sake of conversion, he goes immediately right away. Free. This is an aspect people to overlook. They'll quote one thing out of...
I was going to say, Rabbi, does it say this in the Old Testament?
No, it says this in the Talmud.
Yeah, but which one's more higher than the actual Torah or the Talmud?
Well, the Torah is higher. But in that case, the Torah never says anything about beating slaves.
It does.
It says there's a reference that if you strike your slave and he dies that day, you have to pay so. But if he goes on to live,
but it's not encouraging it.
Yeah, but it says you can strike it with an iron rod.
It's the
you're thinking of the New Testament.
No, it's the Old Testament. The Old Testament, the New Testament doesn't have words like that. The New Testament says that a slave is like Jesus. You should serve. A slave should serve a master like somebody would serve Jesus. That's the more lines it has in the New Testament.
That's not what the New Testament says. The New Testament says it tells slaves do not rebel against their masters. Okay. That's a controversial line that Paul said. But can you show me in Torah where the Torah says to beat your slave?
Yeah, I can give you the verse right now. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah,
Big up Shahid, Assalamu alaikum. Just give me a minute, guys. I'm going to bring it up for you now anyway. Let me get it for you. And then you can maybe... it is in Leviticus, 25, 44, 46.
All right, so it says, your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them, you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you as the members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly.
Okay, so that basically says that if they're not Israelites, you can buy and trade slaves.
Wait, that's not what you said. You said that the Torah endorses the beating of slaves.
But can you confirm this one? And I'll give you the other bit in a minute. That's the one that first came. I mean, so technically, you are endorsing slavery, then, aren't you? Because they're buying and selling. That's what
I told you that slavery is part of Judaism.
Okay.
So there's 2 types of slaves. There's a Hebrew slave, which is really what we consider a servant nowadays, even though it's the same word. Yeah. And there's a Canaanite or Gentile slave. Okay. Now, what this fails to tell us is all the ins and outs of slavery. And this is where our oral law comes in, which is similar to Islam's hadith. In other words, there are judges who decide the ins and outs to every aspect of civil law. And that's what I was quoting earlier.
Okay. I've got that one. Yeah, it says, when a man strikes his female slave with an iron rod. Yeah, that's Exodus 21, 20, 21.
Yeah. Okay, Exodus
21, 20, 21.
Anyone who beats their male or female slaves with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. But they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. This doesn't encourage them beating their slaves. This is a legal ruling saying what is a person liable for. Do you want the person to be killed if they beat a slave? It's saying clearly that it would behoove anyone not to beat them, because if the person would die, then he would be put to death.
Okay, but the problem is, yeah, the one that I've got, yeah, I've put it on the back chat here on this chat, and this is what it says. I've just copied and pasted it on there. I can give you the link for it as well.
Sure.
So if you have a look at it, it says, when a man strikes his male or female slave with an iron rod so hard that the slave dies under his hand, he shall be punished. Yeah. So basically, if you hit him with an iron rod, then he can be punished. But however, if he doesn't die after 2 years or 2 days or 3 days, then it's fine. But that basically says that, well, if you do hit him so hard that he dies, you can get punished. Right. But if you hit him and he survives, then it's okay.
So this is telling us that don't hit your slave because you might be the one getting killed as well, which is not something that's encouraged.
Okay, but you can hit your slave because he might live and you're not going to get punished. That's what the next bit says.
Obviously, if the action you're doing might have a result that may take your life, it's not telling you to do it. This is a law code. It's telling you crimes and consequences. That's a far-fetched from saying that the Torah or Judaism encourages the beating of slaves.
But it doesn't say. But it just says that if you do it, yeah, this is what the punishment is.
Right.
So it doesn't really say. But it doesn't really say that not to do it. Like it says, "Thou shalt not kill." As an example.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of laws not covered for sure.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know because obviously now I understand what you mean. Yeah, it makes more sense now. Yeah, that way when he's saying it that way. Okay.
When I study other religions, I give them the same consideration that I expect people to give to the Talmud or the Torah. Many times there's a statement in other religions that it's just mentioning something, right? I mean, it's not encouraging it. And there's a lot of things that people say against Islam on that, where they'll take something out of context and they'll be like, that. It's not encouraging it, only because it mentions it and it doesn't tie a death penalty to it. It doesn't mean that it's encouraging it. It's giving a response to a custom that was widespread back then. Back then, people were allowed to kill their slaves and move on, right? But the Torah is saying, we're not going to let you do that. It's still an elevation of the status quo.
No, that's it. No, to be honest, like this is one of the verses, thing you brought up here, and I thought, well, obviously Buddha's not here. But, I mean, I did a little bit of research on it myself when I was speaking to some Hebrew Israelite brothers. But I did notice that it's obviously not the same as the Atlantic slave trade and stuff like that. But that was like completely a different level.
Okay. So what would Rabbi? We're on that prophet question. Like,
just 1 second, Rabbi. Yo, Shahid. Assalamu alaikum, my brother. What's up, man? Shahid.
Is he alive?
Yeah, he's probably just listening. He's probably doing his work, studying. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, go carry on.
So it's a difficult. Yeah, right. So I acknowledge that they're prophets in the sense of the strict definition of what a prophet is, someone who speaks words of God. But Judaism, we kind of say a prophet is a little bit more than that. It's sort of a person that has a mission of bringing people back to monotheism.
Mm-hmm. I think the best comparison is to ask the question: can someone claim to be a prophet today in Islam?
No.
Okay, so that's the same idea. Now, there could be someone that by the definition of the word prophet could speak the word of God, but Islam itself would not acknowledge them as a prophet. So Judaism also has a cap. So,
there's statements in the Talmud, isn't there, Rabbi, that say that there's thousands of prophets?
Or there were. I mean, it says that there were hundreds of thousands of prophets. There's a statement in the Talmud that said that since the destruction of the Second Temple, prophecy has only been given to children and to lunatics, to crazy people. Right? But the job of the prophet was only to bring people back to the Torah. In other words, it says that if the prophet tells you to worship other gods or tries to institute another religion, your job is to kill that prophet. Now, prophethood predated the Torah, right? The Torah calls Abraham a prophet, but this is before the Torah was given. There were no checks and balances. Being that the Torah says that no one could add or take away to this message, the prophets that profess this Torah can't do that. If they do that, they're called charlatans. They're basically people trying to begin another religion. Judaism does not have a prophet in the sense of someone like Muhammad, because someone like Muhammad brought something new to the picture. Some people could consider Jesus a prophet because he also brought something new to the picture. But Judaism doesn't tolerate anything new brought in after the Torah was closed.
Yeah, but when did the Talmud come?
The Talmud, first of all, reiterates the rulings of the court. The Torah allows this court, as it states in Deuteronomy chapter 17, to adjudicate civil law. Now, this is something that many other religions have. A court to decide checks and balances so the country could progress in a uniform manner, but they don't claim to speak for God. In other words, I think everyone acknowledges that the rules in the Talmud are man-made, but God gave the authority to the court, which doesn't exist nowadays. The Sanhedrin was abolished in around the 3rd century of the Common Era, to create laws so Israel can function civilly, ceremonial law, not anything to do with God, right? How do you keep the Sabbath? How do you keep Yom Kippur? But not whether God is mad at this or whether God forgives you for that. I know that you don't want me to bring up Islam a lot, but I think Islam and Judaism are very similar. And just like there are rulings today in Islam that people acknowledge don't appear in the Quran, but still feel some sense of loyalty to keep for the sake of the Ummah. And that's how Judaism feels about what we call the oral law.
Well, I was going to ask you, if you don't mind, do you know, in the Torah itself, right, is that completed, the Bible, or can we find any other books later on?
It's completed. I mean, the Torah itself says, don't add or take away. Now, there's other books clearly outside the Torah. I mean, the Jewish Bible consists of, books of the Psalms and stuff like that. But all that is to amplify the initial message. In other words, it could be beautiful. It could bring you closer to God, but it can't override or add to the initial message. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's sort of like isn't that like a Gentile belief that all the books are like together as one, and they're
right. It's like a Gentile, also a Karaite belief that they quote the book of Isaiah on the same level as the book of Exodus. Right. I mean, there's a hierarchy to what we believe. Yeah.
But the Torah, who actually wrote the Torah then? Was it Moses then?
God wrote the Torah and gave it to Moses. That's how I view it.
With the instructions within the Torah. Clearly, the story of Moses talking and the events that happened in the desert, those are historical, right? But in terms of the command, I mean, Torah means instructions. The actual instructions, we believe, were created by God and given through Moses. Yeah.
In terms of your punishments then in the Torah, like for homosexuality, adultery, do you, obviously, if you believe in that, do you still carry out practicing that? As a Sharia thing, as a Muslim, we try to do it in a Sharia country. Obviously, we can't. I don't think I don't think any country's pretty much run Sharia at the moment, anyway. But what about What about in Judaism? Would you still carry? I mean, in Israel, do they still do that? Or
well, Israel's a secular country. Every punishment that appears in the Torah has to be carried out by a court. By a court of qualified judges. Uh-huh.
And basically, Rabbi, they have to basically find out that, if it's, you can't just obviously blame somebody. You need proof and witnesses like we do in Islam, for if you're actually saying, someone's, a fornicator or adulterer or whatever, you've got to give the proof. I suppose it's the same way with you guys, isn't it? You can't just make it up for somebody, can you?
We have
that's the job of the court. I mean, the job of the court is to bring witnesses. However, this court doesn't exist anymore. Because it was
how many witnesses do you need, if you don't mind me asking? Let's just say for adultery, how many witnesses do you need?
The Torah says 2.
2? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But we do have, Rabbi, mini bet-dins, mini courts that do set up marriages and divorces and business rulings and stuff. So we do have it on somewhat. I mean, but
they're not really courts. They're doing things that anyone else could do.
Right.
So Jewish law makes a distinction between courts that could fine you to pay a certain amount of stuff, that could put you to death, and all these are courts that people needed ordination going back to Moses. But the courts of what people do nowadays, like writing divorces, anyone could do it technically, because the court is just a group of 3 Jews together, but it has no authority on the big issues. Yeah.
Right. It's just communal. It's for the community. It's for the set, whatever particular set you're in.
So the Jewish laws technically are not applied then at the moment then from the Torah. Is that what you're saying, Rabbi? I want to be clear with you guys, because obviously what I'm saying is, if you had a proper Jewish state, if you have a full Jewish state, then basically you would do, yeah. But because you live in a secular country, obviously it doesn't happen, yeah, which is fair enough. Yeah, I can understand that point.
But the laws are carried out, but the punishments aren't.
I want to ask a question if Brother Sid Bash don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead, brother. Go.
Okay, another question. Who is Israel? Because according to me, for Beno Israel also say Israel is the son of God. Just like the Injil or the New Trinitarians say God begotten a son.
Ezra. Quran says that Jews believe that Ezra is the son of God. So there's actually no source for that anywhere. Just look it up. It's Ezra.
So who's the one you say now? I mean, I may be pronouncing it wrong.
I think he's referring to Ezra the scribe, right? Isn't that who they're connecting him? Yeah.
Right, the Quran says that Jews believe. I'm not sure if it's even in the Quran. It might be in a hadith, but it says that Jews believe that Ezra is the son of God. I never read that anywhere in Jewish literature. I never met a Jew who believed that. I mean, there's videos.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just type
David.
it online. Judaism, Ezra, son of God. See, like, if you see anything Jewish claiming that. Only the Quran makes that statement. Now, I have a friend online. His name is Yosef Elia. So he made a whole video responding to the claim, basically reiterating what I'm saying. No Jew ever believed that Ezra was the son of God. But that's the statement made in Islamic circles. But it's never been testified. I mean, Ezra was an individual who lived during the Babylonian captivity, and he helped the Jews leave Babylon and return to Israel. Now, the Talmud says beautiful things about Ezra. It says that if Ezra would have been alive in the time of Moses, that God would have given the Torah through him. Nowhere in the Torah does it teach that God has literal children. But if that's his son, I mean, who's God's wife? I mean, we have to ask all these questions. But yeah,
Yeah, but don't you see that's playing semantic and playing with words? In other words, just saying like basically God or Most High said is his son, but it's not to be taken literally. And then others say, you know, is the wife of the Most High.
Right.
I mean,
We're
and they're
trying
not
to
playing
relate
with
terms.
words, and that's not
I'm pretty
innovation,
sure.
and that's not going against the Torah itself.
No, not at all. I'm pretty sure that you call your Muslim counterparts brothers. Are they really your brothers?
The in brothers in faith, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. So we're God's children in faith, in terms of Israel being God's chosen, him caring enough about us to help save us. But that doesn't mean that he gave birth to us. We can get stuck on what's called first stage thinking. Right? We have to approach, well, not just Judaism, but Islam and Christianity with a more sophisticated mindset. But we can use these arguments that the liberals use against us, because the same argument you use against Judaism, some leftist is going to use it against Islam for some other idea that I'm pretty sure doesn't mean what the leftist is saying it means. So let's you know.
I'm just saying, you know, if we go with the text, what the Torah says, and then you've got the Talmud that usually apply it to, yeah, and I haven't looked into Talmud, I'm not going to lie.
The Torah
However, even if we take away the fact, yeah, who's the one that wrestled with God as well? In other words, is in your scripture, I just forgot which part.
Yaakov.
Yaakov,
yeah?
Israel. Yeah.
So you believe in Israel wrestle with God, and then he's the one that I'm talking about. Yeah, that could be that user referred to as in his son as well. But yeah, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, no, it says
Did
Israel.
he wrestle with God? Do you really believe in the Yaakov wrestled with God?
It literally says that he wrestled an angel, but then afterwards, he said that that angel was some sort of representation of God, was God himself. Now, clearly, that we know that angels speak for God. We don't really know exactly what angels are, right? They're messengers of God.
We do in Islam. We know exactly who the angels are. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm not saying not who they are, what they are, and what they're made of. And you know, all we know is that the word angel in Hebrew, malach, means messenger. And so sometimes, and it does appear like this in the Torah, that someone thinks they're speaking to an angel, and they're speaking to God himself. Not that God is in some way embodied completely in that angel, or that angel is God, but that angel acts as a mouthpiece for God. I mean, that's all it means, right? I mean,
yeah, but that's a messenger, in other words, delivery message. It don't mean it's God
right,
or anything
but it
regarding it.
Okay, it has no
But
self.
when you say Jacob wrestled with God, now we're talking literal here. So there's no words play here or interpretation, because
But it
we
also
can go
says,
with go on.
it also calls it an angel. You know, so angels really don't exist on their own. They're
Yeah,
not
but
a
in that
separate entity.
contradiction, in one hand is saying he wrestled with Most High, and then in the other hand is saying he wrestled with angel. That seems like contradiction. I mean, I hate if you say you don't know angel. I mean, to us in the Quran, it tells us clearly that Allah created the angel from light. And the job of an angel is they have no choice, they have no free will, they do as they are commanded. So we know clearly in the Quran who the angels are.
All those ideas actually came from
And
the
there
Talmud.
is no fallen angels in the Quran either, not the idea of fallen angels. But yeah, go ahead.
We don't have fallen
notion-
angels either.
So the notion of angels in Islam was taken from the Jewish Talmud. The Talmud predates Islam, and basically every theological idea that Muslims hold dear regarding God being one and angels only being able to do the will of God comes from Jewish rabbis. It predates the Quran.
But I thought you didn't know what's the thingy angel in your
Hold on 1
thingy
second.
and what's
No.
their job. But yet now you're saying
No.
the idea has been taken from
I'm making
Talmud.
a distinction. I'm making a distinction between the Talmud and the Torah. The Torah doesn't say. The Talmud are just the opinions of men. I'm telling you that Islam took opinions of men and deified them and basically said God said so when they were just quoting rabbis. And that's something that if you really look into Islam, you'll see a lot of. There's a lot of quotes that the Quran makes, and it says God says, and it appears in the Talmud 300 years, 400 years before. In other words, Islam is really just a form of corrupted Judaism. Right, but we know better, and we know better not to think that only because the word angel, first of all, like the notion of angel being a separate entity is nowhere in the Torah. The word messenger seems to be a mouthpiece for God, and it appears in many different ways. Angels don't have wings, angels don't have legs. It doesn't say it's in the Torah. You know, so
Who says angel ain't got no wings? According to me, and I hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me, because if I'm saying it wrongly, the part that I'm saying wrong is me, and Allah and His Messenger is free from it, but angels do have wings.
Okay. All right. Again, because Islam came late on the scene, right? So it took a lot of...
And you know, there's a challenge, since you're trying to say Islam is the corrupted part of whatever you want to call it. You know, there's a challenge in the Quran that says, yeah, why don't you bring forth all your children, all your family, and we do the same, and then we invoke the Most High's curse upon the liar. So if you actually want to go that far, I'd be more than happy to do so.
I don't even understand that challenge. You're saying that...
So basically trying to say Islam is false, in other words, or is innovative, or something new that came, yeah? And it's got nothing to do with Most High. But there's a challenge in the Quran for Banu Israel, and also for the people that believe in Injil. It says,
what the rabbi is saying
to
is that
settle the matter, rather than arguing and going forward and creating further division, he said, if you're truthful, bring forward your family.
What the
your
rabbi
children,
is saying is you believe the same
and
thing.
then we invoke the Most High's anger or curse upon the liar.
We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't
Or
invoke
death.
God's anger. God forbid.
You
Wait,
see, now we can see who's the liar when you're afraid to do that.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
That has to be
Allahu
the
Akbar,
dumbest-
that's all I've got to say. Alhamdulillah.
I
That has
mean,
to be
what
the
you're saying is
silliest-
silly. I mean, what the rabbi
Hold
is
on
saying
one
is you believe everything we believe, but you just believe it in a different way.
If you
That's
believe
all.
in Most High and there's a challenge in it, and you make an accusation that
second.
Islam is
All right,
false,
bring God
Islam
here.
is
All
an
right, bring
innovation.
God. I mean,
So
if you
there's
want
a
to bring
challenge
God,
that if
bring God.
Islam is false and what you saying is true, and you believe in Most High, then let's bring forth your children, bring forth your family. We'll do the same and invoke
Well, I
the
don't really
Most
believe
High
in witchcraft.
Hold on.
I don't believe in witchcraft. So.
anger upon the liar.
Hold on one second. That has to be the silliest claim I've ever heard. You're saying there's a challenge in the Quran that in
Yes.
order for us to know that something is true, we should bring our children in a line, I guess.
You
in
know
front of
the question we're facing now. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced the same question regarding Banu Israel, and you know what? That's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him that. And you know when He told them that, they refused to do the same.
So
now it
far,
shows
you
who
told
is
us that was
lying.
a
your
civilized
book.
conversation.
We just
This guy
follow
is
him,
a wild
I
animal.
cannot get
Come
up and
on.
say I believe in Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam without following his example and what the Quran tells us. Now the Quran sets this challenge for people like you who claiming that the Quran is lies and it's not from Most High and it's
believe
something
that
you
challenge.
invented. We'll say, come on, if you're truthful, why are you afraid? If you really worship the Most High, that Moses worship, Yaqub worship, why are you afraid? Ibrahim worship, why are you afraid to take the challenge?
It's interesting. When I think that someone belongs to another belief system, I don't think they belong to it because they know that my belief system is true and they're working for Satan, right? I mean, I just believe they're uninformed, they're misinformed, right? However, the Quran teaches that those who speak out against the Quran actually believe the Quran is true, and this is why they won't take the Quran at its challenge. I mean, it's kind of it's similar to a Salem witch trial. I was saying that if you float when they try to drown you, it means you're not a witch. Quite silly. I mean, it's not a sophisticated
actually,
belief
it's better
system.
than what's going on in the world today. If you look at the so-called unlawful, and excuse me for saying this here, unlawful state of Israel, yeah, and Bilad Dusham, which is known as Palestine now, yeah. People are killing each other for what? You come out and say, promised land is the Torah. If you're truthful, why don't we do that's the most peaceful way without people killing each other?
Sir Faz,
And
this guy, we were having a nice
hold on.
conversation about Judaism.
So let's talk
Islam,
about being
and this
truthful
guy
here.
is-
Okay, well, let's talk about being truthful. Israel doesn't claim to be a religious country. However, Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, you see what's happening today. Muslims are rioting against a religious country that claims to represent Islam. This is not happening in Israel. Muslims are killing other Muslims. Jews aren't killing other Jews in Israel. And again, Israel is a secular
Oh,
country. It doesn't
so
speak to the
Israel
Torah.
don't claim that they have the right to that land, but yet introduce secular law and every
talking
single
about
thing that
governments.
goes against the Most High.
We're comparing Islamic governments with
Well, the
governments
government
that
is
claim
backed
to
by
be
the
Jewish.
the people that believe and that they have a right
Alright.
to that land. But
So-
yet, you know who I respect the most? I'm not gonna lie. The Orthodox Jews, I respect them the most. Those that speak out even against the unlawful state of Israel, I have a high respect for them. And some of them are my neighbors. I ain't got a problem with them. I actually think if any Muslim bring a problem to those type of Orthodox Jew, I'd hope that I would help them. But not those lying Jews that want to take away something that does not belong to them.
Islam, as it exists today, is the biggest creator of atheism in that region. There's more atheists currently in Iran per capita than Muslims. Why? Because of the Islamic Revolution, because of the backwardness of the Quran. Muslims are fed up, right? We don't see this as much in the Jewish world. I mean, not to that point. I mean, they're upset at a country that claims to be run by the Quran because they know it's primitive, it's backwards. And we see that anywhere where Islam rules, carnage follows. This is just historical. And we are Orthodox Jews, by the way. Like, we don't support the state of Israel from a religious perspective. However, I rather live in a secular state of Israel than a religious Islamic republic any day.
Yeah, that's all
Yeah,
right.
I
That's
just
all
wanna
right.
weigh, yeah.
What's the next topic?
Yeah, I was going to just answer the rabbi's thingy.
Yeah,
Actually.
I just came back. What's happening? Sorry.
No, nothing. Yeah, I was going to say, Rabbi. Yeah, if you actually know, yeah, the Mughals actually ruled all of India. Now, to answer to your question is about carnage and everything. There was only 17% Muslims at that time. The rest of them were Hindus. Even till this day, there's only 15% Muslims. The rest of them are Hindus. So obviously, the Muslims didn't do a good job. If it was carnage, because it's a Muslim-dominated area there. A Hindu-dominated area in India. So I kind of don't agree with what you say on that side because
No, wait.
Muslim,
Hold on. In 1948, India was partitioned to give Muslims their own homeland by the British.
Nope. It wasn't. That wasn't the case. That was not the case. That the British decided to give the Muslims. No, they didn't. If the British wanted to give it to the Muslims, they should have just left it as it was, because all the people were getting on as they were fine.
Partitioned India to create
The British
Pakistan? Right, the British. That's what I just
British.
said in 1948. Correct. Why?
Okay.
Because the Muslims were very violent and they were adamant that they didn't want to live under Hindu rule. And the Muslims that remain in India today are killing the Hindus and vice versa. Right? So anywhere they go, they have to be the majority or they become violent.
Okay, just answer to your question then. Why did the British... Walaikum salam. Yeah, 1 second, sis. Let me answer this question to Rabbi.
Okay.
So why did they create East Pakistan and West Pakistan then?
Alaikum
If it
salam wa
wasn't-
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ukhti.
It's
Why-
been a sausage
why do you think
fest
they
the whole
created
time.
these
Let's get the woman a chance to some womanly touch and feely going on. It's all guys here. We finally got change of
Yeah.
pace. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask some questions
John,
because
you're not gonna like this. You're not gonna like this change of pace. Trust me.
If she's worse than the guy, that's all right. That's fine with me. If she's hardcore, that's good.
You don't know what you're asking for.
yeah, I
When
don't
you talk
know-
about
I don't
Islam
know
with
if
her,
Rosh-
yeah. Get ready.
God is good. God is good. God is good.
and I just wanted to say, because you were speaking about Jews don't really go around persecuting people, and there's a lot of wars within Muslims, in-house fighting. But at one point,
Religious
the Jews
Jews.
were but at one point, the Jews were accommodated in lots of parts of North Africa and the Middle East, and they betrayed the Muslims, and they ended up, going to establishing this state in Israel, persecuting Muslims. They also have, the state of Israel has attacked Egypt, has also fired missiles at Iraq as well. So, they're not completely innocent when it
Hold on
comes
a second,
to
hold on.
persecution and oppression.
So it wasn't the Jews of North Africa or Mizrahi or Middle Eastern Jews that established the state of Israel. It was mainly European Jews. It was the Arab countries that kicked the Jews out of Middle Eastern and North African lands after the establishment of the state of Israel, because they couldn't trust them. They felt that they were probably spies for the state. But before the state of Israel, Muslims and Jews got along beautifully, okay, to a
Exactly.
certain extent. Right. So it wasn't Sephardic or Middle Eastern or North African Jews that established the state of Israel. Arab countries kicked them out of their land, took their property, specifically in 1948 and in 1956, and this is why they were forced to enter Israel.
I personally don't believe that, because there is still certain Jewish communities within the Middle East, and also even when Israel was first being established, there was a lot of Jewish terrorists as well in the ghettos who were also committing atrocities and blowing up buildings and stuff like that. So we have to be kind of fair and consistent here. Obviously,
I'm not denying that.
There is in-house fighting within the Muslims, but the Jews also have...
I'm not denying that. No. At a war, people kill each other. Jews done act of terror. I mean, terror means basically violence done for a political end. Absolutely. For sure.
I wanted to ask you guys,
going too far,
last question, Abdullahi, this last
go
question, brother, yeah? Because, obviously, Christians, Muslims, Jews, we all believe that the Messiah is coming. We have basically established who our Messiah is. And obviously, Jews were once the chosen people. God sent you Moses. You guys kind of broke the covenant. God sent you Jesus. You guys crucified him, or, well, you think you crucified him. So who is your Messiah?
Judaism is waiting for the Messiah.
But who is he?
There's really no consensus of this in Judaism. He's expected to be a military leader. He fulfills the role of the king in Judaism. That's it. There's nothing metaphysical or spiritual about it.
So you said he's going to be a military leader. We believe that, I don't know if you've heard of the Dajjal. We believe that your Messiah is actually going to be our Antichrist. Have you heard of that before?
I know Christians teach that. I didn't know Muslims taught that as well.
Yeah, we believe that he's going to be at the Dajjal, and he will actually be followed by 70,000 Jews, I think it is.
Yeah. So this is my point that I made earlier, that other religions demonize their opponents. In other words, we just can't be mistaken. We have to be working for the devil. In other words, we believe that Muslims and Christians are just malinformed. They're misinformed, right? You're not working for the dark forces knowing that Judaism is true, but you're saying that Jews actually believe that the Quran is true and Islam is true and do everything they do out of spite, working and fighting knowledgeably against God. This is why Islam is seen as more primitive and less sophisticated than Judaism.
But that's not true, though, Rabbi.
The thing about Islam, let me just fill him, Shafaz. Just 2 seconds, because I can't really be off for too long.
Yeah. And then let Abu Bilal go after that, innit?
Yeah, so the Quran basically came to confirm and clarify, and the ultimate goal here is the truth, So if you're upon the truth, you're upon the truth. If we're upon the truth, we're upon the truth. And what we have found historically is that the Jews, they deviated from the truth. You understand? Yeah, and like I said, they were the chosen people, and people make mistakes, and God gives people the opportunity to come back. But what we find is the Jews didn't want to come back, and they had become arrogant. Yes, this is why God had sent a new messenger to confirm and clarify. Most of the stories in the Quran are very similar to the stories of the Bible and the Torah. Yeah, but there have been things that have been changed throughout time. This is why I say confirm and clarify. And we talk about those who have deviated, because deviant ones have a certain influence to misguide others. You understand? So this is why God makes it very clear in the Quran who to be aware of.
I'm familiar, and I would say most Jews are familiar with the narrative that appears in the Quran. However, Islam, as well as Christianity, are offshoot belief systems. They're offshoots of Judaism. They're offshoots of Torah. So they would clearly have to some way negate their base in order to justify their existence. I mean, there's nothing new with that. I mean, the Mormons do it with the Christians all the time, right? For something to be new and better than what came before, it has to in some way degrade what came before. There's nothing new. I mean, clearly.
But the same claim can be made against you as well, because what's I gonna say? Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, he's not the advocate of the Torah. Hold on. He didn't come with the Torah, so therefore, same can be applied to you. You came with something new that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam don't even know about, and that's why in the Quran it says Ibrahim is neither Banu Israel, nor is he from the people of the Injil. He's a Hanif and he's a Muslim. So therefore, Islam, you'll find is not just this Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you think it started with Adam all the way to all the Anbiya. So anybody got a claim to Ibrahim is also, and you do say the covenant, and remember the covenant started with Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. Not just Banu Israel. It started with the Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. And now the Quran is telling us Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam is neither Banu Israel nor from the people in Injil. He's a Hanif and he's a Muslim. And anybody says otherwise, produce your evidence. So can you see now? We actually jump ahead of you with your claims. Go ahead.
I'm glad they used the word
Jews
covenant.
And Christians and Muslims, there's something very special. There's a hadith actually. There's a hadith actually about Prophet Abraham ﷺ, that the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians all love him. And when we speak about the word Muslim, you know, Muslim just means somebody that submits their will to God. So you don't have to be from the Middle East. You don't have to be, you know, people do just ascribe Islam to Muslims, but Muslims, you know, because we believe that Jesus was a Muslim. Yeah, because he submitted his will to God. We believe that Adam, Moses, all the prophets that came before were Muslims. You know, it's not just an exclusive term to an exclusive people. Islam is universal. But Judaism now, I don't think it is universal because it's more of a lineage sort of thing. Not anybody can become Jewish. And this is the arrogant part. I'm not being disrespectful, but this is the arrogant part of your faith.
Anyone could become Jewish,
you guys believe that you are the only chosen people and you only have the right to...
Hold on. Anyone could become Jewish, by the way.
A Zionist Jew who said... Yeah.
Okay. So anyone could become Jewish.
Well, I had a different conversation with somebody else who said that you can't
ask a rabbi. I mean, perhaps he's not religious. He said that Abraham was in a covenant. What happened on Sinai is an extension of that Abrahamic covenant. As a matter of fact, it was prophesied to Abraham that his children, his descendants, would be slaves in Egypt, right? And then God would bring them out. This is how we tie Israel in with Abraham. Islam is an offshoot. What is Judaism an offshoot of? What's the Torah an offshoot of? In other words, if anyone is looking for ethics and morality in their life, and they find two belief systems, and they both claim to be ethical, they both claim to basically worship the same God, it behooves you to go with the non-offshoot, to go with what's older, and that's
but before the
Judaism.
Torah was revealed,
that is incorrect. That's incorrect.
Hold on, Yusuf, last question, yeah? You're saying what is the offshoot of Judaism, but prior to Judaism, they were still prophets and messengers, starting all the way down from Adam, alayhi salam, who was preaching Tawheed, who was basically preaching the oneness of God. There was prophets way before the Torah had come preaching the same message, but the Torah was the first actual scripture that was established. Do you understand?
That only appears in the Quran. In the Torah, it does mention people before Abraham, but they didn't have a message. The first message, national message, was God's will revealed on Mount Sinai to not just the Hebrews, but to a mixed multitude. So the Torah itself teaches that you don't have to be of Hebrew pedigree to be part of the chosen. Anyone who chooses, I mean, you said that you believe in a Messiah. Well, if you go through Jesus's genealogy, he's descended of Ruth. And isn't Ruth from Moab? It shows that people from the outside could come in. It's part of our religion.
Okay, I'm done with my line of questioning so far. I've let the brothers talk to you.
Well, yes, like I was saying before,
to that last point.
That if anyone is looking for an ethical belief system, and I'm speaking to people because I know, at least in America, the vast majority of people convert to Islam, convert in prison, right? I mean, people who are trying to better their lives, right? It behooves people. Oh boy, where's that noise from?
I thought you were the guy with the motorcycle, Rabbi. Aren't you a motorcycle?
Yeah. It behooves people when they're looking for an ethical outlet in life, right? All things being the same, because I'm not about to say that the laws in the Quran are less ethical than the laws in the Torah just because they came from the laws of the Torah. If all things are the same ethically, it behooves you to go with the older belief system because clearly the newer belief system is a copycat, is an offshoot. And by definition, it has to belittle the previous belief system to justify its existence.
No,
right?
but when the previous
my question to you is that have you ever
corrupted,
considered becoming Jewish?
No, because I believe that. Listen, this is why I said Islam came to confirm.
Zubaydah, can I say something?
Hold on, let me just finish, brother. In the Quran actually says, if you are in doubt, go back to previous scriptures. So we are encouraged to go back to the previous scriptures, but we're speaking about the original ones, not the.
But the Quran can say whatever it wants. It's a later book.
Yes, but like I said, it came to confirm and clarify.
It could claim whatever it wants. It's still built off the religion of the Israelites.
But what is the source? What is the source of the message? Yeah, the source of the message is to believe and worship God. This is.
I could write a new book today and claim.
I think I can understand. I think I understand what she's trying to say, Rabbi.
Brother, let me just say something. The commonalities between these faiths is God. This is what is the source of the faith, to believe in God. And then there comes guidelines, like you said, instructions. Yes, and in previous scriptures, A lot of things have been changed. People have, gone astray, and this is why the Quran comes to clarify.
All right, so
and
we don't believe
confirm.
that. We don't believe things have been changed.
Well,
in other words,
what she's trying to say, Rabbi, is that the message of Adam through Noah to Abraham was a pure
I'll tell you why. In the Torah now you claim Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was meant to sacrifice Isaac. Well, it's totally fabrication. Even if you check the age at the time Isaac was born and Ismail, you can clearly see it's Ismail and no Isaac, because Isaac cannot fit that category. Number one, I can't even. Well, there you go. If you agree, then the Torah has been changed. And if you agree, thank you very much.
No. I said that my point is
that
has
made a very interesting
I can
point.
create.
He said that in the Torah you need 2 witnesses to convict an adulteress, but Islam says that you need 4. So is that not more of a fair and more justice system as well?
I can write a book today that says you need 5 witnesses. Does that make my new book superior? Again,
so you believe your book is
listen. Let me. Aisha. Is your name Asha?
Yeah, Asher.
Okay. Let's just go back to the claim that the statements that you were saying about Islam being an offshoot of something, which is incorrect. That's a fallacy.
Yeah, but you can't say it's incorrect. We're discussing it now.
I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna explain to you why. I'm gonna explain to you why.
Okay.
It's not written by men. Islam is not written by a man. It's from God. From Allah.
That's part of your creed.
No, that's not part of. Listen.
Just like I believe things in my creed.
No. All right. With the Torah, let's go back to the Torah. Yeah. In the original, it was from God. Yeah. Then
we believe
the scribes. Then the scribes started changing the rulings in the Torah. Started writing it down. Yes.
No.
Yes.
I mean, according to the Quran, according to later books.
So it's gonna. I'm not talking from the aspect from the Quran. This is the whole point I'm trying to say. It's within your
Torah with Quranic lenses.
It's not. It's not about before. It's not about before. That's the whole point. Islam was there from the beginning of time.
And you believe that in faith?
It's not about faith. It's just no.
Just Jews, we believe that God read Torah and created the world too. That it was in the beginning of the world too. So what about?
That's not. You don't believe that though. you don't.
I absolutely believe. I believe every aspect of my life is.
Guys, listen. I know for a fact you guys don't even believe some of the stuff that's in the Torah. You don't believe in heaven and hell. You think of it as a metaphysical thing. Like you think of it as it's not literal. It's just something that's like. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't believe in everything.
We believe in heaven. Heaven is.
Hold on.
You guys actually have your own interpretation of what the Torah is.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on.
Well, you have your own interpretation of what Torah is saying.
Hold on 1 second.
Nah.
But the Torah doesn't mention heaven or hell. Yes, I'm
actually,
sure.
It does.
Oh, yeah? Show me, please. Show me.
Okay, give me a second. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Let me just get the verses. Let me get the verses. What? I don't speak from my own mind like you do. I don't speak from my own mind. I have to get evidence.
You say anybody can become a Jew, and this is why I have the problem with the term Jew, because Jew are not Banu Israel, are people that later on decided to follow the Torah. In other words, that's where the Jew comes in, because if you look into the Torah, we look into Injil, we look into Quran, you won't find Jews or Jewish. What you will find is Banu Israel. And this is what I mean when you say anybody can become a Jew, you're actually going against the Torah, because we know in the Torah it says and even Injil and even the Quran, the Banu Israel is the
you want a response?
12 tribe. Hold on, the 12th tribe of Banu Israel. So the Banu that's dealing with tribe. So when you're dealing with Jews and saying anybody can become a Jew, that's going contradicting the Banu Israel or the Torah that say in the 12th tribe of Banu Israel. Go ahead.
Okay. The word Jew is an English word today. If you're in Russia, what we call Jews are not called Jews, they're called Hebrews. In other words...
Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay. My point is, how can anybody become from the 12th tribe of Banu Israel? How can they become? Now, without exposure, address the question. How can anybody become the 12th tribe of Banu Israel when they don't belong to the 12th tribe of Banu Israel? Unless you're talking about Jew, because Jew is a new invention, people who chose to follow that way.
In Talmudic literature, the word Jew never really appears in terms of people becoming Jewish. It's always entering Israel. Even in Islamic tradition, you have the notion that Ruth was from the tribe of Moab, and not just Ruth. Nama, which is the wife of King Solomon, was an Ammonite. In other words, people from the outside could come into Israel. As a matter of fact, on Mount Sinai, there stood a mixture of peoples from all the nations, and they, 2 chapters later, were called Israel. So I think you need to double check your Quran and your Torah.
I think there's a difference between
I think
Jews
you're kind of
and
confused.
Beni Israel. I think there's a difference between Jews and Beni Israel, because we believe that the sons of Israel had become Muslim.
The word Jew means the same thing the word Muslim means.